How long do we have to be recorded for that recording?
I need you to stop thinking about that.
So the whole time?
I know that your eyes are darting at it back and forth right now.
They're not. I looked at it one time.
Oh, you did that.
Yeah, I
did. It's like a Tim and Eric sketch. What do you want to talk about with regards to writing? What have you been thinking about?
I'm writing about this for the column. I think there's something sort of more elegant about calling it a column than a post. You know, because I guess there weren't posts back then.
Although
there were just columns.
The post is today's column, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. It's just, we really got sort of the shit end of the stick in terms of trading. Are we allowed to curse on this? Never mind.
Yes.
I'm thinking about this for my column, so I'm sort of hesitant to talk about it for too long, but I will say that what I have been thinking about and what I have been experiencing, so I think about it after I experience it, is the sort of intense state of stimulation, overstimulation that I'm currently in. I think as a result of a change in lifestyle schedule, the beginning of the year, because things are starting up again, right? The holidays are over and I have teaching obligations and work obligations with clients. And so things kind of kick into gear. And there's this period of time where there's just a lot of stimulation. And I think that this is generally, for me at least, not a good state to be in when I'm writing. If I'm overstimulated, it's hard for me to process thoughts. It's like I'm gorging on thoughts or thinking, you know, like I'm at the buffet of overthinking and I'm overeating at the buffet, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that I reach times like that in my life pretty frequently, actually. And then the question just becomes, how do you manage your thoughts when they race? Like there was the thought that I told you about over the summer that kept recurring to me when I was at that concert, where I was just like, because I was so enmeshed in the music, I was just like thinking about my thoughts. And I noticed that my thoughts went from like work to my writing to work to the family to my writing, and it was like looping over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I felt really sick of my thoughts at that time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I felt that even just noticing that was something that tipped me off, that I need to maybe like take a break, or I needed to go to the sauna or something like that at the time to sort of try to break the cycle. But other times I'm having really intense overheating with thought moments, and I think that it's actually really good. So I don't know that it is always a bad thing, but it's certainly something that needs to be managed.
Yeah, are we just describing mania?
Are we just describing thinking? Are we just describing the experience of being a human?
We're going to encounter the one listener who has a degree in psychiatry or medicine, and they're going to contact us and tell us that we're experiencing a manic disorder and we should call a hotline. Speaking of which, I'm saying this out loud so then I can kind of hold myself to it, which is that I am going to turn this into a hotline. I'm going to create a Hughes House hotline.
And by that you mean, hotline, she means literal hotline. We could say that it's currently a hotline. And in fact, today's another hotline day.
Oh, yes.
But it's going to be a call on your phone hotline.
Yes. Like back in the day when you were feeling lonesome and there were people on the other end who, for just a couple of dollars a minute, were willing to make you feel less lonesome. That kind of hotline.
I think that was a sex hotline.
Sex was not a requirement. If you read the brilliant novel Vox by the brilliant writer
Nicholson Baker.
I love that book. Anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about being overstimulated and stimulants, not, the type, not coffee or cocaine, but just sort of mental stimulants, like having a dog and the caretaking that requires is a stimulant of sort. A child is a stimulant. Work is a stimulant. My essay is a stimulant, and what you just said reminded me, what you were talking about with sort of thinking a lot about yourself, reminded me of the fact that I think the stimulation is also being contributed to by the fact that it's an I piece, meaning it's first person present, actually, the essay.
Is it in the present?
Yeah, it's mostly in the present.
Wow. Branded content
Right here. And I think that writing about yourself while feeling stimulated makes you even more stimulated.
And that plays into the question that we're going to talk about today. However, I do think that there's another avenue that you can explore, and it's something that you told me once, actually, via Jenny Offill, and I think in one of your classes, or maybe it was a reading when Weather came out, and she described herself as like a Depression era writer, where she was saving any little scrap of sentence that she had written at any point in her entire life, and she would just go through her old notes and repurpose them variously as she wrote new books. So that, like she would write, I'm just going to make up an example. She would write an essay that didn't turn out very well for her, but she didn't throw it away. She waited until she had another essay, and she would reach a juncture in the writing of that essay and think, oh, wasn't there something that I wrote about like this already? And then she would, snip out the patch from the old essay, patch it into the new one, sew it up real nice and tight so that you have you've salvaged the jeans, so to say.
I love that. That's great. Depression era writer Jenny Offill. I wonder if that was her. I hope it's her. That seems like it would be her. It
seems like something she said during the rollout of Weather, I think. Well, I've been thinking about that because that's something that's happening to me right now, where I find myself frequently in a spot where I really like something that I've written, but I can't use it because it just doesn't fit the piece anymore, or it just isn't working somehow. There's something that I noticed structurally about it that won't work. For example, there were these poems that I loved in a novel in progress that I was working on, but I found out too late. Probably as soon as anyone else heard the idea, they found out immediately that lengthy poems of 8 or more pages probably don't belong in a novel unless you're Max Porter.
Oh.
They didn't belong in my novel anyway. So I had to put them in a folder on my desktop. I have a folder called Failures.
Oh, I think you should change that name. I have a folder called, damn it, I'll think about it.
The folder called Failures is, I think, intentionally really harsh, because it's something that I dip into somewhat frequently, actually, because there's pieces in there that I like, but I have failed. I'm the failure. I have failed the piece.
No, I understand. The name came to me, and it's The Well. I have a folder called The Well.
Which is a positive take on what I'm talking about.
Well, I would say it's just neutral. You don't want to fall into a well, but you certainly aren't a failure for having a well.
You don't want to fall into a well and then turn into a ghost that then becomes entangled with televisions and crawls out of This is a Ring reference. You don't want that. But I have dipped into my failures folder recently and was able to bring the bucket up with one of those poems that I was able to repurpose in some way for the new book. So I was pretty happy about that. It also provided me with an avenue forward when I was frankly feeling overstimulated in the current piece. So always take Jenny Offill's advice and look back at things that you've written in the past if you don't know where to go. And remember that nothing you write is ever going to go to waste.
Traffic swirl.
In the pendulum that is first person present, it swings again to caller questions.
I have been working on a book for a long time, and I flip-flop and waffle between wanting it to be an autofictional novel, or memoir, or a collection of essays that have something of the structure of a novel. And genre is so loose these days that I get really confused about deciding what it should be, and so I'm frozen and I can't do anything on it.
Flip Flop and Waffle could be the second generation Waffle House,
I was going to say
pancake house,
the same thing.
breakfast place.
Was completely going to go in the diner direction with this question.
The middle of America.
Forget writing.
Flip Flop and Waffle is a fantastic business, especially if we acquire Greenland, because then we could put them in Greenland, you know?
Oh, no. That would be bad.
We've been topical one time in this entire...
And it was in a bad way.
Times are tough. Okay. But not for our caller, who is in a bit of a flip-flop and waffle, but has work. So it is a problem of, as I understand it, what do I call it? And it sounds like, what do I call it, is a necessary question to answer in order to finish it. Now, I wonder if you have thoughts on that.
It depends on what you mean by finish. It sounds finished, and I think that you can call any draft finished. You know, anytime you get to the end of a draft and say, okay, I wrote the book, or okay, I finished the revision or whatever, you can say that you've finished. There's no real finishing in this game we call writing. I don't think that you can ever really be done with a piece if you're the kind of writer who always returns to something and always can read your thing and find something else that you want to be different. Now, I don't think everybody does that. I don't think that everybody reads their pieces once they're done with them. You know, like, wasn't it Toni Morrison who said that, I think a reporter asked her if she ever like opened her novels once they've been published, just to like, you know, relive old times or whatever. And she said something like, why would I do that? Like, I'm done with that book. I never want to look at it again.
That's how I feel.
And I feel that way sometimes too. But I do think that there's this refusal to finish, which is sometimes really generative. And I think questions of genre and questions of like how you're thinking about your draft are really fertile territory for like a reimagining of what your existing draft might be, you know? So if it was written once as a memoir, and then you're like, what if I just in my own brain think of this as a novel now? My experience has been that when I've gone back to that draft and revised it or whatever, it feels different. It feels more alive to me. When actually kind of in either direction that I swap. If I have something that's a novel and I'm like, I'm going to think of this as an essay now, or a memoir now, it similarly feels alive just because the way that I think about it is different, which I think goes to show that these ideas of stagnation and overworkedness and underworkedness and any quality judgment that someone can make about a piece of writing is pretty much only an effect of how they're thinking about that piece.
Just to offer something, I don't know, practical, what's the word? Immediate to our caller, I would suggest thinking of it as a piece of fiction for the duration that you take to revise it or finish it. I'm sorry, I don't know kind of what stage the project is in. So I would recommend giving yourself the freedom to not have to commit the narrative to real life, right? Tether it to the whatever actual sequence of events that a memoir sometimes requires of people in their mind, which, by the way, there's a really great, what is his name? John Gazda? Who's the guy who runs the nonfiction program at Iowa?
DeGata. John DeGata. Sorry, I just took a class with the playwright Matthew Gazda, so that's what happened there. Got Gazda.
So John DeGata has a very famous essay about, fact or fiction. He's a nonfiction writer, and his entire argument is that you can kind of put fiction into fact, into nonfiction. We'll link that, but listener, I feel that the more important thing is to be able to put things into the piece that you think are missing. And if those things happen to be imagined things, created things, rather than, recorded things, lived things, that to me is worth it. The only exception I would say in your list of potential genres that I would be mindful of is if something is a series of essays, to me, that does register differently as far as a reading experience, right? So then we're thinking of pieces that are shorter and stand alone. And I think if you don't already have that, you would be cutting up the existing manuscript into shorter pieces and sort of having to create, little beginnings and ends for them if you were to turn this into an essay. And I think if it didn't come naturally to you to have this be a series of shorter things, it feels like maybe unnecessary to now go in and create those cuts, right? Rather than treating it like a full narrative.
I don't know if it would be unnecessary. It seems like any move that you make as the artist in a piece is always necessary once you send it off into the world, publish it, finish it, whatever you want to say. Like, I've slotted things into third person when they were in first person and then slotted them back into first person later, just because, I don't know, like my needs changed from one draft to the next, and switching it into the third person and then switching it back into the first had a tangible effect on the prose between that. Like if I were to read the first person and then the switch back into first person, it changes when you swap it and then swap it back. So I don't really like the word unnecessary, because I think that anything that you ever do to your piece is permanent. Like, you can't actually go and undo that thing, because you're investing more thought, you're investing more concept into the piece, and that's going to show. Any screen time that you have with your piece, or any like exposure time you have with it, is going to enrich the piece in some way. Now, there is like a feeling that you can get in your own work where it feels overworked and it feels like too crunchy or too, knotted, where every single little word has a reason behind it and you've thought about it so much that you feel paralyzed, like it sounds like you do, and you can't change anything. And in that case, I think it's a really good opportunity to actually just like step away and take some time off of it. And then when you come back to it, just think of it completely differently. Think of it as a different genre, or give yourself the permission to think of it as a novel in one chapter and a memoir in another chapter. The beautiful thing about genre is that I think that it can be really fluid, and trying to pin yourself into one of them is essentially a marketing decision that you're making during the creative process. Like, nobody cares about the genre until you're going to talk to agents or you're going to talk to publishers. Like, it actually doesn't matter at all before then.
So just because our listeners frozen, the most tangible advice I could offer is, if you've been writing and rewriting this, I would give it to someone without telling them sort of what it is, and just get their feedback on it, and talk to someone, right? Introduce a different voice, introduce a different perspective into the piece. And if you're not finished, then I would proceed at this stage as if it is fiction, to allow yourself to do whatever you want, so that you don't feel bound by the confines of nonfiction in order to complete it. And if this is a question about how to position the book to, say, query someone or submit it for magazines, for publication, for independent presses, then I would probably look at what they have in their catalog or what they're looking for. And if you're really interested in them, position the piece to be a sort of something that's kind of missing from their oeuvre.
Oh, missing from it?
Yeah, because you want to be the thing that fills it, right? If you don't want to be the 7 billionth person sending a memoir about your...
Grief memoir.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, again, once you're in the territory of having to submit something or send something and you're thinking about this as how it will be marketed, the conversation becomes a little bit more strategic and less artistic, in my opinion. Because I can tell you for a fact that, I have sent out and submitted things that were nonfiction as short stories and vice versa.
100 times.
Actually, not vice versa. I
I've
haven't submitted
both.
a short story as an essay. I don't think I have. I don't think I've written anything like that. But I've definitely submitted pieces of nonfiction as short stories. I mean, I changed them some, but
Yeah. I think that the line is so blurry between those two things.
Yes.
I mean, what do you think about... I think that people get really emotional when you say, introduce some fiction into your nonfiction, and they maybe don't get as emotional when you say, introduce some nonfiction into your fiction, although there's still the people that are like, no, novels need to have nothing to do with you. But I think that kind of person is more rare than the kind of person that says, you're lying in your memoir.
Yeah, the person that says you're lying in your memoir is Oprah, and we're not going to go against her. We can't go against
Wow.
We can't go against Charles Dickens and Oprah.
James Frey
James Frey.
of Benton Harbor, Michigan, I'd like to point out, my hometown.
We're back.
Just wanted to say that. Old James Frey, who just, I think, is publishing a AI-generated memoir right now.
You're making that up.
No, I'm pretty sure that in interviews he's been like, yeah, I use ChatGPT for large portions of this.
You know what? Go with God, babe.
Yeah, do your thing, babe. You already got in trouble once. You don't got anything to lose at this point.
James, call us if you've got some questions.
Yeah.
Call the hotline.
For real, I'd love to get James Frey on the show. That would be so crazy. It would be the most bonkers thing.
We got a third
Talk about
chair.
somebody who really knows what to say about fiction and fact. It's really interesting because I think that I've read some pieces somewhere on Substack or some bullshit like this where people are reevaluating his treatment during that whole thing where he published this memoir about being an addict in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And they found things they were like, you were never so close to suicide, you laid down on the train tracks or something like that. And he was like, but I was suicidal. And he got rough treatment because the facts weren't true in his memoir, although the emotional truth of it, he was suicidal. The fact that he didn't lay down on the train tracks isn't necessarily the thing that makes that the wrong creative decision in the memoir, And I actually generally have a lot of latitude for writers who, in their memoirs, are trying to preserve a kind of emotional truth versus a literal to the letter truth, resequencing things to make it more narrative, things like that. To me, all pass the smell test in nonfiction and memoir. But again, a lot of people get very emotional about this and feel that that is not true and that you're essentially just lying when you're creating your piece of art, which somehow has a lying component to it.
Yeah, you broke the rules. And more on breaking the rules on a different episode.
Breaking the rules is good, but our baby is crying, and there's one rule we can't break, which is the rule of a baby must be fed.